Did John Steenhuisen lie to make it seem like he's more modest than other ministers? Is it now backfiring on the DA? So I remember seeing John Steenhuisen entering a modest Toyota Corolla last year and being like, nah, that is not important to report on. It also felt weird, as if Steenhuisen wanted to send a message without acting like he's doing it, so I didn't entertain it. Well, now the story has come back. Take a look at the video.
Minister Steenhuisen, people are driving black German-made cars. You are driving just a Toyota Corolla.
Toyota Corolla.
But why? Why are you subjecting yourself to modesty?
Cost-saving mechanisms.
Yeah.
More money to be spent on the citizens, not on the politicians. There we go.
All right.
There you go. Very weird video, but he is right. If we see ministers doing more of this, it will be highly appreciated, right? So this video was being scrutinized by many influential people last week. Certain people with a big following on Twitter made a big hoo-ha about it. But before it started trending, who started the issue? The beloved ActionSA. ActionSA wants the DA to seem like an evil, lying, hypocritical organization, but do the facts support ActionSA's claims? Helen Zille is on record saying the DA ministers do not use blue lights. So what happened? Since Helen is known to have said that the DA does not use blue lights, ActionSA's Athol Trollip asked Steenhuisen in Parliament to tell the country what vehicles he uses. ActionSA's Trollip asks if the minister uses a vehicle fitted with blue lights.
We asked every single minister in the GNU whether they drive luxury vehicles, how many do they have, what do they cost, do they use blue lights? And John Steenhuisen was one of the ministers that we've received a response from.
To which Steenhuisen responds,
When I assumed office as the Minister of Agriculture, I inherited an Audi A7 in Cape Town that had been purchased in 2019 and long paid off by the Department of Agriculture. It had been used by Toko Didiza in the past. It has 136,000 kilometers on the clock. And of course, I resisted the temptation and urge as new ministers come into office to purchase new vehicles. That has been the standard approach in the past. Instead, I said quite clearly, I'm happy to use the existing vehicle, mindful of the fact that we have to save costs, that the country's economy is not in a good state. And I think it's a good example that we don't purchase any new vehicles. The situation was slightly more complex when it came to the official vehicle for Pretoria, because that vehicle was owned by the Department of Rural Development and Land Reform. And therefore, the Audi A7 that had been used by Minister Didiza there, also purchased in 2019, also with a similar mileage on the clock, had to then be transferred to Minister Nyonso. The department then came to me and said, well, look, we now need to buy you a new vehicle for your use in Pretoria because we've had to give the official vehicle to the Minister of Land Reform and Rural Development. I insisted that there would be no new vehicle purchased. I instead asked them to bring me a schedule of all vehicles currently in the Agriculture Department's fleet. There I found a Toyota Prado that had been purchased in 2019 for former Minister Zotwana, who was the Minister of Agriculture at the time. The car had around 230,000 kilometers on the clock. There was some concern expressed by the department because vehicles are supposed to, by handbook, be swapped out at 150,000 kilometers. I insisted I'm quite happy with the Toyota Prado. At 7 years old, it has high mileage, but I'm mindful of the fact that we need to save costs. I would utilize that vehicle. So there'll be no new vehicles purchased by Minister John Steenhuisen. Minister John Steenhuisen uses two vehicles that are utilized by former ministers, which are over 7 years old, with high mileage, and for which no expenditure has been incurred by the department because these vehicles were paid off 7 years ago when they were originally purchased.
So ActionSA takes all these answers and goes public. When certain members of the public hear the story, they freak out and go crazy. Oh no, the DA uses vehicles that are fitted with blue lights. How hypocritical of them. This whole thing was actually very childish. The response from certain journalists, influencers, and citizens was unbelievably immature. Years ago, Western Cape, the province run by the DA, actually banned the use of blue light brigades in their province. This was except under cases of life and death.
Helen, we of course have the opportunity of sort of looking back and now with better hindsight, because you not only oppose this as Western Cape Premier, you also at the forefront of helping to introduce legislation that bans VIP brigades effectively in the Western Cape. Let's talk about how that has changed.
Now, that is the whole problem with these blue light brigades, because it tells the whole public that these people have a time that is more precious than your time, that they can push through the traffic, that they can get other people off the road, that they have more right to be on the road than other people. And of course, that is nonsense.
It became a DA policy. Helen Zille was asked about the issue that was raised by ActionSA and Daily Maverick, the fact that she kept on reiterating that the DA ministers do not use the blue lights should have made people pause and think. But for some reason, they did not pause to think about it. They kept saying, John Steenhuisen uses the blue lights. ActionSA does not ask Steenhuisen if he uses the blue lights on his vehicles. They don't do that. Very strange, don't you think? Did Helen Zille claim that the DA ministers do not use vehicles fitted with the blue lights? No. She claimed that the ministers do not use the blue lights. Two separate things. But you find these people like a guy called Mighty Jamie pushing this idea as if there is anything controversial there. There are some people who simply push lies even when those lies are not based on any logic. There is no desire to pursue truth and facts, and that is very sad. If Julius Malema or Jacob Zuma says something good that I agree with, I will say I agree with him. If Malema does something right, I will support him on that matter. I do not like the ANC, but I applauded them for being mature enough to accept the loss they sustained in the 2024 elections instead of behaving like parties in other African countries. Unfortunately, there are influencers and even journalists in this country who do not care about facts. They do not do the follow-up to make sure that what they're reporting is based on truth. They simply say and post things that support their narratives. And like Paul Mashatile's door-to-door campaign, what they mean for the DA's harm sometimes ends up working out for the DA's good. I mean, many people were unaware of the fact that the DA, unlike other political parties, acknowledge that the unnecessary use of blue lights is an abuse of power and poses danger and delays to general motorists who are actually paying for those vehicles and the blue lights on them. Knowing this fact may give the DA some points with certain citizens, something that ActionSA, Daily Maverick, Mighty Jamie and others may have not paused to consider while they were focused on pushing their narratives. Let's not forget that Steenhuisen did not buy those vehicles for himself when he became minister. These are vehicles that were bought by your ANC. The ANC has put in requirements for their executive ministerial vehicles to be changed before they even reach 300,000 kilometers.
Those 7-year-old vehicles are going to be scrapped very soon because the law says you may not travel in a vehicle above a certain kilometerage. So they will buy new vehicles and the department will buy the vehicles. And we will ask the questions again next year.
This means that when Steenhuisen came into the position, he could have bought new vehicles, but instead of buying new vehicles, he chose to use the old ones that the ANC would have rejected.
There I found a Toyota Prado that had been purchased in 2019 for former Minister Zotwana, who was the Minister of Agriculture at the time. The car had around 230,000 kilometers on the clock. There was some concern expressed by the department because vehicles are supposed to, by handbook, be swapped out at 150,000 kilometers. I insisted, I'm quite happy with the Toyota Prado. At 7 years old, it has high mileage, but I'm mindful of the fact that we need to save costs. I would utilize that vehicle. So there'll be no new vehicles purchased by Minister John Steenhuisen.
And instead of people either appreciating this or simply letting it go, Steenhuisen is demonized for that. The cars were bought and fitted with blue lights by the previous minister's team. Hence, yes, the vehicles have blue lights gadgets on them, but the DA never claimed that their vehicles do not have blue lights. Instead, they claim that they do not use the blue lights. This is so stupid that I cannot even understand the adults who have turned this into a big issue. Spreading lies is typically the biggest tool that the people on the left like to use. Nothing based on facts and evidence. They have a mission, make the other party look bad at any cost, and that is what they do. I'm sure there are true errors in the DA that you can find and publicize, but you are too busy lying and focusing on nothing burgers like the Toyota Corolla issue. Did they ask him to clarify what he meant when he was seen being driven around in the Corolla? No, they didn't. I also didn't know the details, but I didn't value the issue, hence I never even made a video about it. Now that some people have valued it so much, here's John Steenhuisen to explain what the story with the Toyota Corolla was.
Additionally, when ministers are not in Gauteng province or in the Western Cape, they are entitled to hire vehicles to attend to their official duties. Now, again, I'm not sure how ActionSA expects people to execute their official functions if they are not able to utilize vehicles to get to the communities that need to see them. And in my case, in the Agriculture Ministry, many of these are far-flung and in very difficult areas to reach. Nonetheless, like all DA ministers, we've made a commitment that when we hire vehicles, we will always try and use the most cost-effective option. And that is why when I was in Limpopo for the presidential Imbizo, I insisted that we hired a Corolla Cross for utilization on that day because we were not going into any tricky terrain or anything. We were going to the local city hall, and that was the most cost-effective option on that day.
So the point is that I am not going to rent a BMW X5 or X3 or an Audi or a Mercedes. I am simply going to rent one of the cheapest brands that normal citizens use. I mean, the same Ethel Trollop who helped make this non-issue a big issue can't help but acknowledge that what Steenhuisen did in renting a more affordable vehicle when he could have rented a fast German car is commendable and sadly not what many other ministers choose to do.
Now, if I can go to that interview of John's when he got out of a meeting in Limpopo and he was questioned by a journalist, why aren't you driving a black luxury vehicle? His response was, no, I'm driving a modest Toyota Corolla Cross to save the taxpayer money so that there's more money to do the work. And he ended with, there you are. Now, that looked heroic and good for him because he could have hired a Mercedes-Benz or whatever at the airport. There's no prohibition of that. So he did show austerity by hiring a Toyota Cross to work in Limpopo.
If Steenhuisen can rent a Corolla when he could have rented a Mercedes, SUV or BMW, it means even if he was to buy the vehicles, he would not have bought those German vehicles. Why do I think so? Because of the Corolla rental and because he himself in his private capacity does not mind driving a 30-year-old car.
And I want to make it very clear, when I drive myself around for private use, I make use of my 1979 Mercedes-Benz 280 SE S-Class, which I really enjoy driving around. And those who are in Cape Town will be very familiar with that vehicle and my use thereof. If not, I utilize my wife's Land Rover Discovery for transit around. So
when it comes to the vehicles within his department, Steenhuisen sees that the vehicles should be used until they have been in an accident or stolen or can't be used because of serious wear and tear. Instead of the wasteful rules that the ANC have in place that ministers should not use vehicles after a certain mileage, regardless of whether they can drive well or not, John has a different view. A view I believe is shared by many, if not most, of the taxpayers of South Africa. The trick is simply to ensure that the vehicles are well maintained. This is the trick not only with cars, but with houses, power stations, office buildings, aeroplanes, etc. But the comrades don't like such an idea. They want the newest and flashiest cars, houses, offices, and more. They don't bother to think twice about the cost and waste because it's not their money lost, but the taxpayers. yours and mine. Guys, this is a big deal. The ANC is the one that pushes the idea that if a vehicle reaches certain kilometers, it is to be replaced. It is within the ministerial handbook. The ANC is pushing for spending on politicians, and here's a politician who says, let's not get rid of the vehicle simply because it has reached 150,000 or 250,000 kilometers. Let's drive the vehicles until kingdom come, and the stupid Twitter influencers go crazy simply because he showed himself getting into a Corolla. Without getting their facts straight, they want to paint Steenhuisen as a hypocrite. ActionSA and all these influencers who went crazy about this issue last week could have channeled their energy into something that actually matters and spread a message that's worth shouting about. They could have used this as an opportunity to say, all ministers of South Africa, what John Steenhuisen is doing in this area should be a standard. All ministers should rent modest cars. All ministers should have one vehicle that gets used up. But no, their hatred for the DA seems to have blinded them from pursuing a cause that is obviously more beneficial to the citizens of South Africa. I think the problem with DA leaders is that they pay attention to what Twitter fools say too much. They do. It's a waste of time to pay attention to these so-called influencers. A lot of them are MK, EFF or ANC supporters. The DA has a good policy here. This nonsense of blue light brigades needs to come to an end. So I support their initiative. Helen Zille, do not allow this fake outrage to make you surrender. John Steenhuisen, I think you didn't go far enough. The best case scenario would have been you taking those vehicles and selling them and then buying a Toyota Corolla and Fortuner with the proceeds. The evidence that should have gotten the DA in trouble is if the opposition and the journalists have provided video footage of Steenhuisen using the blue lights. What does it mean to use the blue lights? It is to have the blue lights on, flashing lights. That is the evidence we need. Don't tell us John Steenhuisen uses expensive cars when those are the cars that were bought by your favorite incompetent ANC comrades. Don't tell us that the DA uses blue lights when you fail to provide proof of the DA actually using the blue lights. They never claimed to drive cars without blue lights fitted. They said that they will use blue lights if there is an imminent identified threat regarding the safety or life of the office bearer, or there is a threat of damage to the property of the office bearer.
But here's the point, Alec. Helen Zille made a statement publicly, and she said DA members of parliament and executive members will not use blue lights. That is a definitive statement. John Steenhuisen said on your show yesterday that he does not use the blue lights. He's instructed his people not to use the blue lights, save for cases of emergency or life or death. And so did his spokesperson use that yesterday. So there's something hypocritical in this matter that didn't come out yesterday in your answer, in your interview with John Steenhuisen. If you say you do not use a gun, don't carry a gun, and so you only use it in a matter of life or death. If you do not use blue lights, remove them from your motor car. It's as simple as that.
I mean, if the DA says they don't use the blue lights, what should be the question? Your vehicles have blue lights. Do you use the blue lights fitted on your vehicles? Imagine this. If I tell you that I do not use the aircon when I drive, does that mean that there is no aircon within the car that I drive? No. If I say I do not use the aircon in my office, does it mean that there is no aircon in my office? No. If I say I don't use cutlery to eat, does it mean that my kitchen does not have cutlery? No. It simply means I do not use it.
Like all DA ministers, we've instructed those who are responsible for driving these vehicles that blue lights or these security features are only able to be utilized in the case of a life or death situation where there is no alternative.
The issue of blue lights is not about not having them. It is about respecting and elevating the citizens above the politicians to not use the blue lights unnecessarily. The reason the DA does not want to use the blue lights is because it is a sign that politicians think they are more important. It is a tool used to intimidate motorists and harass pedestrians and motorists. As citizens, whether driving or riding as passengers, we feel the disrespect, the division and devaluation created by the use of these blue lights. They serve to remind us of the distance between us and the politicians, reinforcing a sense of separation and disregard.
His party has made a public statement that they will not use blue lights. Therefore, what you say in politics, you must do, because if you don't do that, you're going to get caught out and people are going to hold you to account.
In conclusion, the question is, does the DA use the blue light system? The answer is no, they don't use it. They will only use it in a matter of life and death. As far as I can see it, there is no evidence that they have used blue lights, yet people complain about the blue lights as if they have evidence of them being used. Someone tell me where the hypocrisy actually is. The cars Steenhuisen uses are older cars that should not be replaced in the next 10 years even. And yet ANC has been replacing cars within less than 5 years of buying them. The cars are said to be worth 2.8 million when the truth is they are not worth 2.8 million today. It's not the case anymore. They were worth 2.8 million when the ANC bought them. Who spent the money on the cars? The ANC. Who installed the blue lights on the cars? The ANC. This is such a tiny little issue that has been blown out of proportion simply because ActionSA is playing silly politics. Guys, anyone who voted for these fools because I suggested it, I am sorry.
When I was in the DA had a policy of no blue lights. So I removed the blue lights from my vehicle. And if your party policy is no blue lights and you make public statements to that extent, then you must remove the blue lights.
That was the leader of ActionSA in Parliament confirming that the DA has a policy of no blue lights. He doesn't say that the DA was using blue lights when they had a policy of no blue lights because he would clearly be lying. The whole story is simply a nothing burger. Please like, share and subscribe. And to support us further, please buy our t-shirts at www.citizenconcern.co.za/store. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Katlego. This is Citizen Concerned. And until next time, beware of the comrades.